Rain hammered the tin roof of the old bus station while Clara sat alone on a wooden bench with her small suitcase pressed tightly against her knees. The station manager had already told her twice that there was no work for a woman like her in a town like Red Creek. Travelers passed by without looking at her, and the few who did only stared at the faded bruise near her eye and the mud on her shoes. Clara had walked nearly 20 miles after leaving the ranch where she once worked as a cook and caretaker. The owner had died during the winter, and his son sold the land within weeks, throwing her out with nothing except a torn coat and $37 hidden inside her boot. She tried every diner, every laundry house, every stable in the nearby towns, but nobody wanted another mouth to feed during a hard season. By evening the station smelled of wet leather and coal smoke, and Clara began to realize she might spend another night hungry. A freight train roared past without stopping, rattling the windows and making the station lights flicker. The manager sighed heavily and pointed toward the door. "Miss, you can't sleep here." Clara nodded slowly, trying to gather enough strength to stand, but exhaustion wrapped around her body like chains. She stepped outside into the cold rain and pulled her coat tighter, wondering how life could turn so cruel so quickly. Across the muddy street horses stomped beside a wagon loaded with hay, and a tall cowboy climbed down from the driver's seat. His hat was dark with rain, and his boots splashed through puddles as he crossed toward the station. He looked older than most ranch hands, with tired eyes and rough hands scarred by years of work. Clara lowered her head, expecting him to pass like everyone else, but instead he stopped directly in front of her. "You looking for work?" he asked quietly. Clara hesitated before answering. Too many men had promised help before asking for something ugly in return. "I can cook," she replied carefully. "And clean. I can sew a little too." The cowboy studied her face for a moment, then glanced back toward the wagon where 3 young girls sat huddled beneath a blanket. "My 3 girls need you," he said. Clara blinked in surprise. "Need me?" The cowboy nodded once. "Their mama passed last spring. I've been trying to run the ranch and raise them alone, but they barely speak anymore. Youngest cries herself to sleep most nights. I don't need a servant. I need someone kind." Clara felt something twist painfully in her chest. Kindness was not a thing people usually searched for in hard country. "Why trust me?" she asked softly. The cowboy gave a weary smile. "Because you looked more scared than dangerous." He introduced himself as Wyatt Mercer and offered her a place to stay at his ranch until she got back on her feet. Clara almost refused out of pride, but the cold wind cut through her coat, and the sight of the little girl speaking nervously from the wagon softened her resistance. She climbed aboard beside them, and none of the children spoke during the long ride home beneath the stormy sky. The Mercer ranch sat in a lonely valley surrounded by hills blackened by winter fires. Inside the house silence filled every corner like dust. Clara noticed untouched toys near the fireplace and family portraits turned face down on shelves. The oldest girl, Emma, avoided eye contact entirely. The middle child, June, carried a rag doll missing one button eye, and the youngest, Lily, clung tightly to Wyatt's leg whenever Clara entered the room. That first night Clara cooked stew from whatever supplies she found in the kitchen while Wyatt repaired fencing outside in the rain. The girls watched silently from the table as if afraid speaking might break something fragile. Clara finally placed warm biscuits in front of them and smiled gently. "Food tastes better hot." June reached first, then Emma, and finally little Lily. By the end of supper all 3 girls had eaten more than Wyatt had seen in weeks. Days slowly turned into routine. Clara woke before sunrise to prepare breakfast while Wyatt handled the cattle. She mended clothes, swept floors, and taught the girls little songs while hanging laundry beneath the bright western sky. At first the children stayed distant, but kindness has a quiet way of entering wounded hearts. Lily began following Clara everywhere like a shadow. June started laughing again whenever Clara read stories aloud after supper. Even Emma slowly lowered the walls around her grief. One evening Wyatt returned from town bruised and angry after nearly losing part of the ranch to a greedy banker demanding overdue payments. Clara sat beside him on the porch while sunset painted the valley gold and red. "You should have never brought me here," she said quietly. "I'm just another burden." Wyatt shook his head firmly. This house was dying before you came. Clara looked toward the window where the girls laughed together while washing dishes. For the first time in years she felt warmth that had nothing to do with fire. But trouble arrived sooner than peace could settle. A powerful storm swept through the valley late one night, tearing down fences and frightening the horses. Wyatt rode out into the darkness to rescue cattle trapped near the river while Clara stayed behind with the girls. Hours passed with no sign of him. Then one ranch hand returned alone carrying Wyatt's bloodstained hat. Panic spread through the house instantly. The river had flooded beyond control, and nobody knew whether Wyatt survived. Emma broke down crying while June held Lily tightly beside the fireplace. Clara forced herself to stay calm even though fear twisted her stomach. She saddled a horse before dawn and rode through freezing rain toward the riverbanks despite the ranch hands warning her not to go. She searched for hours among broken trees and muddy currents until she finally spotted Wyatt unconscious beside the rocks downstream. Somehow she dragged him onto the horse and brought him home barely alive. For days Clara cared for him while fever burned through his body. She barely slept, refusing to leave his side. One evening Wyatt finally opened his eyes and found Clara sitting beside the bed with exhaustion written across her face. "You saved me," he whispered weakly. Clara smiled through tears. "You saved me first." Spring arrived softly over the valley weeks later. Wildflowers covered the hills, and laughter once again filled the Mercer Ranch. The girls no longer looked haunted by grief. Emma helped Clara bake bread every morning, June sang loudly while feeding chickens, and Lily refused to sleep unless Clara tucked her into bed. One afternoon Wyatt stood beside the fence watching the girls chase butterflies across the field. "Funny thing," he said quietly. Clara glanced at him. "What?" Wyatt smiled beneath the brim of his hat. "That night at the station, I thought my girls needed you." He paused while warm winds swept across the valley. "Turns out we all did."